Revelation 21 and 22 give us a vision of hope and of eternal joy. First, we'll see the new heaven and the new earth. We're going to see the new Jerusalem. We're going to see God's presence with us. We're going to see the absence of pain and suffering. We're going to see the river of life. We're going to see the tree of life. At the end of all this, we're going to see a blessing that we're given. We're going to begin with the new heaven and the new earth. The new heaven doesn't mean a new place where God is. When we think of heaven, we think of where the angels are and where we go when we die. That is indeed a heaven, but the new heaven isn't that. Remember, in the Bible, when we see that word heaven, it means not just the place where God lives, but it also means the atmosphere around the earth, and it also means what we call outer space, where the sun, the moon, the stars reside. When here in Revelation chapter 21 speaks of a new heaven, it speaks of the new heaven as in around the earth and as in the outer space. It's the first heaven and the second heaven that are new. The third heaven, where God resides, doesn't need to be renewed. It's perfect. It's never been tinged by sin. It doesn't need to be renewed. But the first heaven and the second heaven have been touched by sin, and so they do need to be renewed. So there's going to be new heavens, and there's going to be a new earth. The earth is going to change the way it looks, the size is going to probably be different. Everything about the earth will be different. It will be new. Remember, at the end of the tribulation period, there had to be a renewal of the earth to move into the millennial period. But remember, at the end of the millennial period, there's also great war. So now there's going to be a new earth where it will have been untinged by sin. We're also going to see a new Jerusalem. The new Jerusalem is going to come out of heaven and come down to be on this earth. And that is going to be the throne room of God. We're going to see that God is going to live in that place. So here, the new Jerusalem, the place that God had chosen for his people back in the Old Testament, is going to continue to be the place where God's going to dwell in the future. So in the future, it's going to be the new Jerusalem, and God's going to dwell there. It's going to be a wonderful place. We're going to see how God describes that in the second. But here, as we look at this new Jerusalem, the point is that Jerusalem is God's living place. Him and the Lamb of God, Jesus Christ, with us forever, living in the new Jerusalem as their home base. Now, does that mean that they won't move from that place? Of course they will. They'll be throughout the earth, but that will be their home base. And as we recognize God is now living with us, he says himself that he's going to make all things new. What does that mean, he's going to make all things new? Well, of course, physically, we see a new earth. We see a new environment, a new atmosphere, a new heavens, if you would. We see all that. But what else is going to be new? Well, he also tells us that there's going to be no more pain and suffering. So when he says that, we need to understand that right now, all our pain and suffering is due to the sin that has come into this world. That sin comes to us through Satan, through the world, and through our flesh. Now, in this new heaven and this new earth, Satan will no longer be a part of it. The world will be completely different because society will now be a Christian society under the rule of God and his son Jesus, and our flesh will have been transformed. We are no longer in our current flesh, but we are in our resurrected bodies. And so the resurrected body will not be one that causes us or drives us to sin. So here we will see that all the causes of sin will be gone. And so the causes for pain and suffering will be gone. One of the things that I'm often asked about, though, is what about the pain and suffering that we will remember? In other words, the pain from this life, or the pain that comes from knowing that people that we loved in this life are not with us in heaven, but are instead separated from us in hell. What about that pain? What about that suffering? The way many scholars will try to address that is by saying that we will forget those things. But I completely disagree with that. I don't think that when we are in the new heaven and the new earth, that we will become less intelligent, that we will forget things, that there will be things that have happened that we don't know about or that we don't remember. I think that the Bible clearly says that when we get there, we will see more clearly, that we will understand more, not that we will have less information and understand less. So I don't think that that's really the solution. I think the solution is actually quite simple. God does all things well. Everything he does is good. He's a loving God. He's a good God. He's a righteous God. He's a just God. He's a merciful God. And so when we remember all that, we recognize that when pain and suffering has happened to us on earth, it was for a purpose, that God was doing all things good. When our loved ones rejected God and are now in hell, we recognize that that is good. Now, how can our loved ones being in hell good? Well, again, we don't have the mind of God. We don't understand all that God understands. We don't know all that God knows. And so because of that, we can't in our human flesh and our human mind, our human understanding and wisdom, understand how that can be good. But when we are in heaven, we'll recognize that indeed it is good. How? We can't understand it now. But then we will understand more clearly. We will know better. We will have the mind of God more closely. And so we will have a better understanding of how that causes no pain to us. So what will actually happen is not that we will get less intelligent and know less things, but we will have more intelligence, know more things, and that new knowledge, that new understanding will enable us to see how it is good and right that things turned out the way they turned out. It is actually perfectly, exactly according to God's perfect, good plan. Now, when we get to verse 9, we're going to see an angel take us to see the bride of the Lamb. And then he shows us the New Jerusalem. And because of that, many people think that the New Jerusalem is actually the bride herself. So the bride is coming down from heaven, and that's the New Jerusalem. But I don't think that that's what's going on there. I think it's more like if you and I were to get together and I were to say, let me show you the President of the United States, and I bring you to the White House. The President of the United States is not the White House, nor is the White House the President of the United States. But the President of the United States resides in the White House. By me explaining that I want to show you the President of the United States and showing you the place where the President lives is not lying, it's not false advertising, it's not contradictory, it's just English language. And indeed, that's exactly what's going on here. The angel wants to show us the bride, but he brings us to the New Jerusalem. And when we go to see the New Jerusalem, we now get a description of what that New Jerusalem is going to look like. Thank you so much for joining me today. Maranatha. God bless you.